why we're echoing. All right, everyone, welcome to the Real Estate Game Changers show. I'm your host, Mike McKay, based in Jacksonville, Florida, and we do this podcast each and every week. This week on the show, we have Ryan Rice. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Yeah. So this is your second time being on the show. So some people may have caught your first episode, but do you want to catch us up on what's maybe happened in about the 2 years since you've been on the show last?
Yeah, for sure. So I think when I was first on the show was when the market was obviously completely different. The business was completely different. You could just pretty much do any marketing method, any of the cheap ones, and crush it. And now, obviously, as you know, there's not a ton of us left. It's expensive. It's harder. You have to be better. You have to want it more. You have to work more. I think when I was doing the podcast with you, around that time, I told you I was working like maybe like a couple hours a day, like nothing crazy. And now it's the complete opposite. It's like I'm up at 6:30 and I don't like get done until probably 6:30 when I get home that night. So um, it's definitely a lot different. We've grown a ton. The big focus back then was just like, hey, get deals, get deals, get deals. And now it's build out the team, let other people
Mhm.
get deals, build out an actual like business. So the focus has switched in that regard. So
Yeah. What have been some of the things that you focused on in terms of building the business in the last quarter?
yeah, so some of the biggest things were initially, we just were not getting enough deals. Like
Hmm.
performance was down. So what really helped with that was consistent one-on-ones with my sales guys and sales training that actually like focused on issues and not sales training that was kind of just like more broad and just like, hey, yeah, we're gonna
Mm.
role play, and then like not really role play the things that my guys really needed help on. So I did a ton of call audits and identified the big things that they need to work on. And so in
Mm.
our one-on-ones and our sales training, we focused on what they were weak at. So that
Mm.
was incredibly helpful. And then two, we made a huge shift in our sales psychology. Um, for like the last couple of years, we have been essentially disqualifying people if they wanted too much money on the phone.
Hmm.
And even if they were like as we would say, like a super juice situation, we were disqualifying those people. And what I came to realize was one, that type of like process was really hard to teach because it was essentially like when they bring up money, we do this like dance with them where it's like we're trying to balance like being on their side and wanting to help them, but also balance like, hey, we need your price to come down. And it was really, really difficult to like train salespeople to do that because that is really hard to do. You have to be like a natural or pay attention for like years to be able to like maneuver that really fine line. Like I'm really good at it. One of my sales guys really good at it, but one of my other guys was like atrocious at it, right?
Mm.
So the biggest switch we made was taking that completely out where we do not disqualify based on price anymore at all. And that allowed my one sales guy who was already shining to continue to crush it, and then the one guy who like wasn't doing well, absolutely like rock star now, because it's such a better, more teachable process now.
When you say disqualify based on price, are you talking about like an initial qualification call with someone or like on an offer appointment or offer call?
So on the initial call, so on the initial call, we'll
Mm.
process them where we build the relationship, get to know like their situation, what they need, what their plan is, go over any roadblocks they may run into. Then at the very end of the call, it's kind of like, okay, well, based on, and we bring up like their pain and their situation.
Hmm.
And keep in mind, this would be like an as is cash situation where like we'd pay all the closing costs and you'd be able to move on your timeline. With that being said, like what do you feel is a fair price? So I'd be kind of towards the very end of that process call.
Mm.
And what we used to do is whatever if they set a number that like my guys knew was not close to our offer range, they would essentially be like, "Oh, well, if you don't mind me asking, like where'd you get that? What got you to that number?" And then they would kind of like in a very friendly way dive in and make it a
Mm,
very logical conversation,
mm,
and which lit the whole lead on fire. So what would happen is the leads that did get through were ones that would obviously drop their price a ton. So they would drop their
mhm,
price, and then of course when we give the offer call, it would be a yes almost every time, right? So they
mm,
never had to have any skill on their offer call because they had to. All the skill was basically confined to that one moment in money section. That was where you needed skill,
mm,
right? Because you already did all the vetting there, the offer call was always cake. So the biggest thing we noticed when we switched and stopped doing that is like my guys sucked at offer calls because it's like, wait, you have to be good at it now. You have to have the skill now. You're not just because basically anyone that was getting through and getting an offer before was a complete
mhm,
lay down. You know what I mean? Like
mhm,
a complete lay down deal. Um, and so what was happening was people were getting disqualified. The ones that were getting through great were turning into deals, but so many people that would have been deals or were just lying about their asking price, um, or were just super like just guessing on a number and not really serious about it. All those people got a horrible taste in their mouth about us and pushed on the phone and like just lit on fire.
mm,
So that's kind of was wrecking us. And from a training perspective, like I said, it was just so difficult to train like the skill piece of that money section because it was so like it was the hardest part of all of it.
mm.
Um, Whereas now they don't have to battle on money at all. So
So you just like eliminated that part from your qualification script?
yes, exactly. We qualify based on urgency, meaning they're ready to make a yes or no decision. That's the most important
Mhm,
thing, right? Like they're ready to make a yes or no decision today. If they're not,
mm,
we either need to figure out why and see if we can add some value and solve the problem, or we give them homework. So if we can't solve the problem now,
hmm,
we'll give them homework so they can solve the problem. Um, or if they're truly just not ready and it's a problem we can't solve, we're just going to follow up with them later. But if they're not ready to give a yes or no decision, um, we're not going to, they're automatically unqualified. Um, so
mm,
from there, once we have urgency, the next
mhm,
thing we need is one of three things, right? So we just need one. So we always need urgency, but
mhm,
then we need either motivation, meaning they're an actual distressed profile, or an
mhm,
extreme pleasure situation. Okay.
mhm,
So we have like about like 11 different definitions of distress. And then the 12th is like someone where it really, really like it's extreme pleasure. Like we had one in Palm Coast a couple months ago where the guy was a realtor. He had no pain at all, but he had a killer investment opportunity that he had
mhm.
to have money for in 2 weeks' time. And so that's an extreme pleasure. So that it was a qualified lead.
Yep.
Um, the next thing, if so, for instance, if we do not have motivation, that's the most
Mhm,
common one we look for. But if we don't have that, what we do then is skip to ballpark. So we see if their ballpark number is within about or the rough number is about 70% of this estimate. If it's that or below, then we'll process them. And then if ballpark doesn't work, motivation doesn't work, um, and the home is not livable, then that's the last one out of the three. So you just need
mm.
one of those three, but you always need urgency. I'll say the most common is urgency and motivation. Those are the most common of any lead that's considered qualified with us. So we just need both of those things.
Urgency is just willingness to make a yes or no decision in your world, or
Yep, exactly. Ready to make a confident yes or no decision. And whether
mm,
it's really important too, we ask that question and we really want to make sure they are confident. And how we go about that is we don't want to explain it away because if we just explain it of like, oh well, just if you can tell me yes, that's great, and if you can tell me no, that's great. Either way, if you explain it like that, they're obviously just going to say, oh yeah, sure, I can totally do that. Like they're always going to lie to you.
mm,
So we really try if they give us a non-committal answer when we ask the urgency question, we try to go for no pretty quickly with them.
mm. I'm curious how it sounds. So, like, let's just role play it. Let's the urgency question. I'll be a seller. I'll give you some non-committal thing. I'm curious to hear how
Yeah.
your script is. Let's do it.
Cool. Awesome. And so, Mike, I do want to ask because I know that they have some cash they're looking to put to a new property. I mean, if we're able to come to an agreement on a price, you guys are definitely ready to sell at this point in time, right?
I think we are.
You think you are?
Yeah. I mean, I think we would be.
Okay. And Mike, forgive me for coming out of left field here. It's just that usually when a seller says they think they're ready to make a yes or no decision, oftentimes it's just a polite way of telling me they're not fully comfortable right now with selling, and that's perfectly okay. That's not the case here, is it?
Oh, no, 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 no. We're ready. I just want to make sure that the price would work for us, obviously.
Gotcha. Pause. So we
Yeah.
get the rebuttal out, and then
Hmm.
now we know, okay, it's about price. So what I'm gonna do then is I'm gonna dive into what that means for you and make sure like we're on the same page. But I'm gonna come back to that urgency question. I'm not gonna ask it the exact same way because I'm not
Mm,
gonna sound like a robot. But I'm gonna say something like, hey, and forgive me, I hate to sound repetitive, but I do just want to confirm now that you have the option to tell me no as long as the price doesn't work. Do you feel like you guys are definitely confident to
mm,
sell it this time? So when I go, if I have to go at it a second time there, I actually
mm.
will really emphasize the definitely, because once again, I don't want to explain it away and give them like a cheap out, because you have to understand
Yeah.
you know this, your only leverage is the number, like your offer is the only leverage. That's all the seller cares about. So if they know they can give you a little white lie of, yeah, I sound good, that's fine, they will always give it.
Hmm.
And you will end up basically giving an offer to a seller who's not urgent, right? So
Yeah.
we actually asked the question. So how I just asked you, that's the beginning of our process script. So that's like we
Hmm.
basically do our intro, we set expectations with them for what the call is kind of going to look like, what's going to happen
Hmm.
at the end of the call. We give them permission to tell us no, all that. Then there's our urgency question. That's when I asked you in the beginning. Now
Hmm.
from there, let's say the whole call goes good, you're super motivated, you confirm the urgency. From there, on our offer call, we actually do a similar setup again, where we ask the urgency question again, but in a more stricter, like more serious kind of sounding way,
Mm.
to really make sure they are confident. So like, let's say like we went through that whole call and everything was good.
Yeah.
Um, we would get on an offer call, and here's kind of what the beginning of that, like, we can just role play the offer call real
Let's
quick.
do it.
It'll take like a minute. Okay, ring ring.
Hello.
Hey Mike, this is Ryan. So you have 5 minutes for a quick conversation?
Yeah, sure.
Great. So I spoke with the partners and they let me know what the property qualifies for. But before we talk about that, they always like for me to talk with you about what it looks like if you do decide to work with us. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay, great. So, and at the end of our conversation, after I let you know what the property qualifies for, do you feel you'll have enough information to make a confident yes or no decision?
Yeah, I mean, as long as you can tell me the price, I mean, that's fine. Yeah. And if, as long as you can close in 30 days, like we talked about.
Gotcha. So, as long as we tell your price and you can close with 30 days, you would feel like you could give a confident yes or no here?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. And again, if you decide you don't want to work with us, that's perfectly fine too. You definitely won't hurt my feelings. So, pause. That's pretty much how it would go.
Yeah. So is
Yep.
your like I guess you call it your offer call, right? That's your second call. You call it your offer call.
Yep. So when that lead calls in, that's our process call. And then
Hmm.
as long as the lead's qualified, they'll be fully processed. The guys will type up a process email to me of all the information. We have like a template, so they'll pull their own comps. They'll look
Hmm.
at all the actives. They'll use our repair calculator to see repairs,
Hmm.
calculate ARV, and then they'll put all those numbers in, and then what they think we should offer. And then I, as the manager, will look at that, pull my own separate numbers, and I'll give them a final like offer price to do.
And then like you said, like on that call at the beginning, you kind of said it would be about a 5-minute call. Is it really that short, or are you diving into pain again on that second call?
Yeah, so we do dive into pain,
Uh,
but like our pain summary is usually only about 30 seconds to a minute. The biggest thing with pain on the offer call is we
hmm.
use NLPs, or neuro linguistic programming there,
Hmm.
where we basically tie the seller to the end emotional state of like what it'll look like when this is all done for them. So
Hmm.
we include at least one of those in that summary. So we used to do longer summaries where I'd be like, you have to do it at least a minute long and all this stuff. Um, I found that those would come across a little gimmicky. And the
Mm,
sellers would almost be like, all right, dude, like it's like if you just play there too long, oftentimes the sellers will like be like, all right, dude, like you're just trying to make me sad, right?
mm,
So we've implemented the NLPs and made it shorter. But
hmm.
yeah, as far as that goes, the call is usually about 5 to 7 minutes.
So is your process call then like significantly longer?
It is an average of, well, it depends on which closer it is. Sometimes
Sure.
these guys get roped into like an hour conversation, but the goal is for it to be 20 minutes. 20 to 30 is like the
Okay.
range of like perfect.
And that's when
And
you're
that's for a
getting
full
out.
process. Okay. So the goal is within the first 6 minutes of the conversation, we need to
Mm,
know if it's a qualified lead or not. If it's not a qualified lead, we disqualify before 6 minutes.
yep.
So if the idea in a perfect world, if the call is going longer than 6 minutes, that means it's a qualified lead who's going to be
Hmm.
receiving a full process.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. So that's kind of like almost the opposite of what a lot of people do, where like a lot of people have kind of a short call on the front end, maybe 15 minutes, and then they have like a much longer, like we do in person, but I know a lot of people even have like the longer offer calls. I'm curious, like, why do you guys kind of have it set up that way as opposed to the way that some other people set it up?
Yeah, we've found it just as far as um just in 1 millisecond, can you process, please? Sorry, one of our guys just had a process and
Bring them
my
on. No, I'm
my
kidding.
other my other guy's like, hey, my guy who's kind of in training to do the sales manager thing was like, hey, you want me to process it? And I just want to let him know, yes. Sorry. Your question was why do we do it the opposite of everyone
Yeah,
else?
why do you do it the opposite? Yeah, in terms of like having the process call be longer and the offer call be shorter, a lot of people do it the other way around. I was curious if there's a rationale behind that.
So for us, it just seems more natural. Cause like I used to do a one call close, which a lot of
Mm,
people when they start off, that's what they do. Where like a seller would call in and like I would do everything on one call. So
mm,
like get to know them, whatever. I'm looking at comps while I'm talking to them and like get around to giving them a number and doing the DocuSign all on that
hmm.
first call. Um, Now, where the reason we do it longer at the beginning, I'll say it just for us, it seems very natural because they call
Mm,
in because they have a problem. So right away, we set expectations, make sure they're actually, want to sell, and then we
mm,
just dive into their problem. Right? It
mm,
seems like a very like natural flow. And then from there, we dive into property condition. So we close everything virtually. So like
mhm,
property condition alone will take 5 to 10 minutes. So you have to ask yourself, are you gonna if you're going to do it the opposite way, it's like, well, you definitely wouldn't do property conditions on that second call. You would have to do that on your first call no matter what. So then it's
mm,
like, logically, no matter what your first call, if you do just an intro and property conditions, it's going to be 12 to 15 minutes there, right?
mm,
And if you don't implement any roadblocks, if you don't implement any motivation, and if you don't implement like any setting expectations or urgency to that first call, then now you effectively created a very transactional call where you're just getting data about their property,
yeah,
and they're most likely not going to answer that second call. So, does that answer your question?
yeah. So, so you guys are hanging up in between these two, and like, how, I guess how long is passing time wise between call number one, call number two?
Yep. So it's different for each closer, just because sometimes some newer closers will take them longer to pull comps, so they'll do like 45 minutes because they're like got to type with their email. It takes them forever. But I'll say on average it's about 25 minutes between your
Okay.
end of your process call, start of your offer call. Um, yeah.
What's the answer rate on this second call? Do you ever lose anyone there? Because that's why a lot of people say they do it on one call, because like they're like, oh, they may not pick up if I call them back.
Yeah, so funny enough, that used to be my fear too.
Hmm.
But going back to what I said earlier, what does a seller want?
Mm. Yeah, the offer.
That's your leverage, right?
Hmm.
And on that first call, are you giving them the offer with our
No, of
process?
course not. Of course not.
No,
Yeah.
right? So exactly. So our answer call is it's almost always, I would say it's 99%, like something ridiculously high. If it ever is not answers, you want to know why? Like what the reasoning
Mm.
is?
Sure. Yeah.
One, it's a skill issue with the closer. Okay,
Mm.
and the number one area where they falter when that happens is the the urgency section. So they they do not address a non-committal answer when they say, you're definitely ready to sell it, right? And the seller's like, oh yeah, possibly. And the reason the
Hmm.
seller said possibly is because they're actually in the middle of inheriting the home, and they're actually inherited with their half brother who they haven't talked to in 4 years. And so they jumped the gun because they got your letter in the mail and got excited. And you don't know any of that. You just hear possibly and you have commission breath and you skip past it. So then when you get done
Hmm.
with your call, you're like, all right, well, I'm going to take everything to my partners. I'm going to fight for that 100K that you want. And I'll give you a call back here at X time. And they're like, oh, okay, great. And then in their head, they're like, wait, pressure, pressure. I still have all these fears. I still have all these problems. So if
Hmm.
there ever is a ghost, it is a skill issue. I'll tell
Yep.
you something really interesting on this. So we had we do 3 calls actually.
Okay.
And so when we get a yes in the offer call section, which is obviously what we always want to hear, right? Um, when we get that yes, we basically set expectations like, okay, great, well, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go type everything up. It should take me about 5-10 minutes. It's 2 o'clock now. And I just want to confirm your email is the Mike at Gmail. Yep, okay.
Hmm.
Great, well, it's 2 o'clock now. I'm going to give you a call back at 2:10, and we'll go from there. So that's what we do. We do a 3 call process for the DocuSign. On that third call, we give them the DocuSign. And here's
Hmm.
what happened one time. So the same day. We'd never gotten ghosted ever between an offer and a DocuSign call, ever. Okay. Until one day we got ghosted twice. Both closers, like, or not the same day, but like both closers had one person each ghost them
Hmm.
between an offer and a DocuSign call. Me, being someone who jumps the gun and just wants to solve stuff, I was just like, oh, well, that's okay. Well, I know how to stop this problem forever. Like, we'll just have DocuSign templates. We'll have everything DocuSign templated out so that it'll take only 2 seconds to type up this DocuSign.
Sure.
And so
Yeah.
they can do it on the offer call, right? Sounds like a reasonable fix, right? So that's what we did. The guys were cool with it. And of course, we started getting deals and everything happening on that second call. So now it's just offer call and then, process call, and then offer call and DocuSign was the same call. And you want to know what started happening out of nowhere? We would get the signature. We always got the signature. Like, oh, that was fine. But dude, like crazy, all of our sellers, almost all of them, even with like my super experienced closer who like everyone loves, started trying to back out of agreements like hours after.
Hmm.
So I let this ride for like a week and I didn't really notice until like I was like, bro, out of all those deals I got luck, like everyone's trying to battle and get out. Like this is never really it's very rare for us. And so I reached out to some people in the community, and someone brought up a really good point about the psychology of um, big ticket closes. And it was
Hmm.
something along the lines of the reason you do 3 calls is because that 5 or 10 minutes of space between the offer call and the DocuSign call is like their way of being like, wow, I wasn't pressured into this. I really made this
Hmm.
decision myself. And like this is something like I'm happy with doing. So believe it or not, that little gap was like what was like incredibly needed for our process. And so I went back and listened to the calls, those 2 calls out of they're doing this for like two years now. Those 2 calls that they did get ghosted between, and there was giant issues with urgency. So they basically gave a number to a seller who wasn't ready to receive a number. And so they
Sure.
felt super pressured. And then on top of that, like they just didn't handle it right. So then of course the seller's not going to answer the offer call. So it
Yeah.
was a skill issue. So all that to say is like it took 2 weeks, but then we went back to our old way, and now we're not having like any back out issues because we're giving them that 5 or 10 minutes of space again. Isn't that
Yeah.
crazy? I thought it would be like the opposite. It's like,
We do something similar for in-person appointments. We don't leave, obviously, and come back. That would be too much effort. But I call it the post sell. So after we have the agreement signed, we give it back to them and we give them a chance to back out on the spot. And we tell them that like once we move forward with this, like there's no way to turn back. So like if you're not comfortable at all, can you just tear up this agreement right now? And that way, like it's okay. And they say, no, no, I'm really 100% in.
wow.
And
Have
then,
you had anyone back out and be like tear it up?
oh, on the spot? No, no. Because
Really?
why would they sign it just now and then back out like 2 minutes later. It doesn't make any sense, right?
It doesn't. So wait, did you see that
But if
basically
you did,
increase?
if they did though, wouldn't you rather be in front of them to handle it instead of getting a text message at like midnight saying, "Hey, I am having second thoughts about this." Right? You could just handle what
100%.
the second thoughts are there, right?
100%.
You were gonna say something else, so I think I cut you off there.
I was gonna say, so I guess I had a brain fart. I don't know. It was involving the can't like. With doing that, did you see a lower rate of people trying to cancel the deals later?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I used to use it a lot when the market, even more intensely when the market was really hot, because we all know back in 2021, that like there was 10 other offers waiting to knock on their door the second I left, like literally the second you left.
Hmm.
So I used to tell them, and I would just be straight up with them. I'm like, you're going to get people who are going to come after me. They're going to offer you more. What are you going to tell them? And they would say, well, I'm going to tell them we already have a deal. And then like, even if you have someone who calls you back and then tries to back out, you can kind of remind them that you did already give them a chance to back out, and that you discussed that you were 100% certain. So you like, I don't understand what changed. And then you usually
Mm.
find out like the one little thing that like you can do to get the deal to move forward. Oh, I just, I wanted to leave some stuff behind, and like someone said they could do that. It's like, so if I could just, you could leave stuff behind, then we're okay. Yeah, that's fine. Right. It makes it really easy.
That's sick. That's actually
Yeah.
that's good, dude. I almost want to
Yeah.
try to implement that and see, like, get
I
the
don't know what you're
DocuSign
doing is
signed.
working. You shouldn't mess with it.
I know, but somehow just get that DocuSign signed and be like, hey, like, I haven't signed yet. If you guys seriously don't want to do this, I can go ahead and just void the agreement. Because if we move forward, there's no turning back. Like
Yeah.
similar to what you say. And
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a good thing, like, because like a lot of times people like they just want to feel like they weren't pressured, and they want to feel like they made the right decision. So you just give them another minute to think about it at the end, and then they can come to their mind, yes, like this is really what I want to do. It solves my problem. So, I'm going to do it. Right. Versus if you don't give them, a lot of people make the mistake, they get the contract and they run out the door. I like to
yeah,
hang
yeah,
out for like 10 minutes afterwards, walk them through what's next, all that, so they feel comfortable. It's not like, whoa, as soon as he got the contract, the guy ran out, right?
that's
No,
so
like
funny.
hang out
When
after.
I if I ever do an in person, that's what I do. Just
You
get it
get the
signed.
contract and you run out.
I'm pretty much just like, yeah, well, great. Well, hey, Ian's gonna be reaching out to you, probably in the next couple hours to schedule this. And yeah, man, I'm gonna go run over and get the ball rolling with everything. And I'm like out like that.
At least you tell them what's next. Some people don't even tell them what's next. Feel like, all
Yeah,
right, see you
I tell
closing.
them
It's
what's
like,
next. And,
whoa.
and usually I have really, really good rapport built if I ever have to do
Yeah.
an in person. It's where they just like love me at that point, and I can almost get away with murder at that point. So
um, so you were saying before, like, when we were talking a little bit offline, you said a little bit online, you were saying like not enough deals was kind of an issue in December, and you really turned it around in January and had your best month ever. Outside of those like sales one-on-ones and just like making sure the training was focused on their weak areas, was there like anything else you changed that allowed you to have your best month ever in January?
well, the biggest thing was that sales psychology switch of not
Mm.
disqualifying in money section.
Oh, that's
That was
right.
the biggest thing because it just made it so our process was like easier and then way more teachable. So my other closer who was struggling at the time was like able to like just crush it. Like within a week, he was absolutely crushing it. He's like, "Wait, I don't have to like battle at money section." I'm like, "No." I'm like, and what I did is, before I made it go live, is I took my more experienced closer and was like, "Hey, you're gonna keep doing exactly what we've been doing because you're a beast at money section. You're fine." My newer closer who was struggling, I was like, "Listen,
Mm.
you're gonna do this new way where money does not matter. You just have to make sure they're urgent and at least motivated, right? And from there, it doesn't matter if you say if this estimate's 300K and they say they want 400, you ignore it. You move on. Price doesn't matter at that point." And he started to perform right away. And so then I
Mm.
transitioned my good closer, my better closer at the time, into that. And he struggled initially because he's like, bro, when I hear him say that high number at money section, like I know exactly what to do. Like I know I can like XYZ, XYZ. And I was like, hey, just trust the process. Just trust me. Like, I haven't led you wrong here. Like, just trust.
Hmm.
And that same day, it was funny. We had our one-on-one, and he had an offer call set up for after lunch, and it was it was with the new process. So we basically did the new
Hmm.
process, did a process call with it, and then we
Hmm.
had our one-on-one at lunch, and then his offer call was right after. And I'll never forget the in the money section, the guy was asking. I want to say the Zestimate was like 250. The guy was asking 220, but it needed like 80K in work or something like
Hmm.
that. Like it needed like everything. So our offer, I want to say our offer was like 100K, and the guy asked for 220, something like that. And he was like, "Man, I just don't want to like give this offer because XYZ." Like he said such a high price, and I'm like, "Man, just trust the process. Like he's motivated, he's urgent. Like give the number." And then after lunch, he gave the offer at 100, and the guy like was begging to take it. It was like,
So, so do you still ask the price question? You just don't try to like get them down. You still will ask.
yes. So we'll
Okay.
ask, and when we ask, we re-summarize their. It's towards the end of the call. So we've already
Mhm.
built a connection. We already know everything about the property. We've already gone through every roadblock that they could potentially run into. Like, hey, is there anyone else that influences their decision? When do they
Mhm.
want to close? Hey, if we agree on price, what's the next thing you'd have to figure out, if anything? So like, just a general discomfort question to get all the other things out of the way, if
Mhm.
there is anything. And then money section. And in money section, we summarize all of their pain and any roadblocks we've solved for them. And then we do a value add of like, and just keep in mind, like with us, it is as is. We are paying the closing costs, et cetera, et cetera. And now, with all that being said, what do you feel is a fair price? And
Mhm.
whatever number they say, now we just move past it. Back in the day,
Mm.
we'd instantly be like, oh, and if you don't mind me asking, how'd you get to that number? And then they'd be like, "Oh,
That's
I saw it on
logic.
Zillow." And then
Yeah.
we'd be like, "Oh, well, just keep in mind on Zillow," and then anchor, anchor, anchor,
Uh,
anchor. Oh, and keep in mind that that number on Zillow does assume your home's updated, right? And I have at least, it looks like about 50,000 in repairs. And they'd be like, "Really?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, I can run you through those if you want." And like, it just
mhm.
made it very logical. It disqualified them. It just lit the lead on fire. So that's the biggest.
Yeah.
That change I think led to it the most.
Yeah. Yeah. I always tell my guys, I'm like, you're never to discuss what the property costs to repair with the seller because you can be 100% honest and they're always going to think it's 10 grand to fix it up and our actual cost to fix it up is probably 50 or 60 or
Yep.
more, right? And
Yep.
they just think you're a salesman, so you're lying. It says
Yeah.
there's no advantage to you to go through price or repair costs with the seller because they'll never believe you anyway. So
And then you make it a logical thing too, right? Like you take
yeah.
them out of the emotional state of mind of this big ordeal, and you start making them think about how much it costs per square on a roof.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No one cares about that
I
anyway.
can get them for $60 a square. And you're like, all right, no, you can't.
All
And they're like,
right.
I hate you. And it's like, anyways, you want to sell to me?
So then on the offer call, you're just kind of giving them a price at that point. You're just saying it qualified for, I mean, what
So
you
we
said
just we
already.
double check for urgency. We got to
Yep.
still make sure they're ready, and we ask it a more serious way because we just want to make sure
Mm,
they're really confident to give us yes or no. 'Cause the last thing we want is I need to think about it, or I got to talk to my realtor friend, or we try to get all those potential rebuttals out of the way, in roadblocks and in urgency. But then we just go into like we tell them what the next steps will look like if they decide to move forward.
mhm,
Then we summarize like motivation using like NLPs, like neuro linguistic programming, and then which literally is like two or three sentences, it's nothing crazy.
mm.
And from there, we then do like a value add, and like as I said before, this would be as is, et cetera, et cetera. With that being said, your property qualifies for blank,
Yep. Gotcha.
and then they shut up for at least a minute, hopefully.
Sure. Yeah. And then, was there anything else outside of that stuff that you did though to solve the issue of getting more deals?
Um, Really, no. That was the main thing. Well, on top of that, like since we were doing our disqualification process, what it meant was if you did slip through the cracks, then that means you were like a laydown. And so the offer call didn't really require much skill because
Mhm.
like you didn't really have to listen for urgency on the offer call because they already were willing to like let you barter them down for 20 minutes on the last call. So they're probably ready, right? So that being said, your offer call didn't have to have much skill because they were already laid down.
Mm,
So we did heavy training for 2 weeks straight, like on Christmas Eve too. Like I gave them the week off for Christmas, but on Christmas Eve we met for like 2 hours in the morning just
mm,
to train offer calls. So
mm.
that was the other thing too. It was like, here's our new process, and then also we're gonna go ham on training offer calls because now it's like the people getting through the door on these offer calls, these are people that want 250 and they still think that's a fair number.
Right. So it's gonna
You
be
know what I
different.
mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, they said the number, you're like, okay, great. Well, that's what I'm gonna fight for. I believe I have all the information I need right now, and you end the call. So they're like, oh, 250, let's go, let's fight for 250, and
Let's
then
go. Yeah.
you come back at 100, right? So you got to have more skill and poise. So we added like where we used to negotiate in the middle of that process call. Now
Hmm.
that negotiation piece is still there, but it is at the end of the offer call once we get a no. So if we get a
Mm,
no, we like label it a no, then we box objections just to make sure they're telling us no because of one thing and not other things. So we basically box out, it wasn't me. You're like, I didn't do anything wrong. No, you were awesome, Ryan. Okay, and then you understand everything about like our process. Like that wasn't confusing. No, I get the process. It makes sense. Okay. And so, and you in our company, like there was no issues with our company, like worried about working with a yellow card. No, yellow card's great. Okay, so was it just price then? Yeah, it was just price. So we box everything, we get it just on price. And then from there, basically, we've already got the no, and it's because of price, and everything else is great. So now we have one thing to focus on. We've boxed everything else out. So then from there, we basically allow them to tell us where they want to go. Basically, we have a question that we kind of tee up that is essentially gives them the option to choose, hey, should we take this the full emotional route or should we take this the logical route? It's kind of like
mm. What's the
we
question?
we yeah, so basically it do, 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 do. Okay, so um I lied by the way. So once we get price, we do try and negotiate one more time. So like once we like label
Mhm.
it a no and they do say it's price, we essentially like, hey, I just want to see if I can run this by them again. Honestly, I hate when I'm not able to do my job correctly. Maybe I can convince them to stretch their criteria. Now, is there a number between where you're at to where they're at that'll get it done for you? Whatever they say, we essentially will then nail down close it, right? Um, right before we nailed on close, we actually asked one question of like, okay, so 115. Now, I can't make any promises, but I'm curious, what happens if they can't do 115?
Yeah.
And the idea there is like, if they say, hey, I have to sell no matter what, then we know they'll take less than that
Mhm.
115. If they say, I'll just wait until I get it, then we know they're pretty close to that 115. So that just
Mhm.
helps me when the closers bring me back that. I'm like, hey, what did they say to the, question? And they're like, oh, well, they said they're gonna have to sell it no matter what, and this is a horrible situation. I'm like, okay, great, we can pay less. From there, they nail them down, and then they're like, hey, I believe the partner store is still open. They come to me. They put everything on. They just mute themselves. I have them keep their headset in so they can hear everything the seller's saying because that's where all
Yeah.
the gold comes out. That's where all because like you'll hear like the wife whisper like, "Why'd you say 115, honey? We said we'd take 90." He's like, "Shut up! I'm playing the game. I know how these guys work." Like all this stuff, right? So we listen for that gold. So we make sure the sales guy still has his headset in when he comes in. It's just mic muted. And then from there, if we're too far off, um, that's when we kind of let them take it. This is what we say. This is like the emotional or logical thing. So we'd say, hey, John, you still there? Yeah, man, I really tried my best. I mentioned to them how big of a deal this was for you to sell, given your specific scenario with inheriting this and having to deal with mowing the lawn every single Tuesday and getting older and not even be able to really do that. Silence, right? This is where we see if they take the emotional bait. Okay. So if
Mm.
he comes in here and he's like, yeah, it's been really hard. Okay, then we have an emotional line of thinking, we take it, right? But if we really get nothing, he's just like, yeah, yeah. That's when now we're switching into the logical phase of it, which is, and though they want to help you get this done, the partners told me if they moved forward at that number, they would most likely lose money.
Mm.
And then we shut it from there. So we give them the emotional bait where we bring up their pain. If we get nothing, then we go the logical route, which is they would lose money. And
Mm,
they decide where they want to take it from there. They take it the logical route. That's when we'll go into talking about what the partners have priced like the rehab at, what the partners believe the property will sell for. And they have all those things in front of them. And mind
mm,
you, we only go logical if they want to. Some people really do. Some people are just like black and white. They want to go there. And then for the emotional route, we don't talk about numbers at all. We just dive
mm,
deep into the emotion. And our goal with either of those line of thinkings at that point is to get what we call the aha moment. That's where like
mm,
they're like, oh yeah, just I just really I need to sell it, right? So or whatever. Or if, for instance, if in the logical route, like, oh, I mean, if repairs really are going to be 60 grand, that really changes things. So no
mm,
matter what, if we get the aha moment, we go into, that's why I really wanted to get this done for you because I know, and then this is the bracket where we bring up whatever they just said because I
mhm,
know the repairs were going to be really difficult to get done because you mentioned that hey, you're already behind on the mortgage, right? And now you got to do 80,000 repairs. So um obviously it would feel amazing if you could just sell this and be able to move on and not have to do any of these repairs, right? So that's an NLP where we like tie them to the future state.
mhm,
Um, and then we shut up, and then they're like, "Yeah, it's great. Oh my gosh!" And then from there, we kind of re-summarize motivation a little bit and say, "Hey, I really want to see this as a win for you. Like, what can I do on my end to make this a win for you?" And we
mm.
leave it open. And most like when that happens, normally they're like, "Well, I mean, I know you guys said the most you'd pay is that 105, and I came back at the 130. Man, if you could just fight for like 107, like whatever, right? Whatever."
Yeah. Yep.
So that's kind of where we take it if we get the aha moment. If we don't, so like if nothing, like if we like go down that full rabbit hole and get nothing from there, it's just like the goal is to figure out like the plan. So we whatever their big pain
Mm,
point is, we tie it to a plan. So if things don't work out between you and the partners, like what's your plan to like get this thing sold without having to mow it and deal with any of the repairs and all the things that you said like you were struggling with? And that's kind of where like the trail of logic, like that's where everything ends there.
yep.
So we do that whole dance after we've already given the number and labeled it a no. We
Yep.
used to do that kind of dancing in the middle of the process call, and you can see like how complex that is to teach and like
Mhm.
how obviously it would light the deal on fire and stuff like that.
So are your closers doing both those calls, or I guess three of them,
Yeah.
including
Yep.
the DocuSign call? Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Closers are doing all that.
Gotcha. You were saying too when we were offline that was the first issue that you had in December that you solved that let you have a great January or the best January ever. The second one, you had said something about like not closing enough deals. Like, how did you mean by that?
Yeah, so it's one thing, as you know, to get deals under contract, like but that's a vanity metric. Like that doesn't actually mean money, right? It just means you got someone to sign a piece of paper. There's wholesalers that lock up deals on the MLS and they make no spread and they spend, every hour trying to make $1,000 and they might get 10 contracts, but nothing. They don't actually make a dollar because they all cancel. So
Yep.
basically what we had seen is our cancellation rate had shot like for like ever it was an average of like 70 to 80% success rate, which is like
Hmm.
industry standard because you're always going to have some certain things fall through for reasons outside of your control, but you want to stay at like 70 to 80% ideally. Now all of a sudden we noticed towards the end of this 2024 that our success rate had plummeted to like 45%.
Hmm.
So like if we were getting like two deals under contract, like one was closing effectively.
Hmm.
So um, first thing we did was we got a process and a template like system in order for when the closers do a process call. So I basically did a whole template where they put in um, comps, what they think ARV is, what they
Hmm.
think actual repairs are. I built a repair calculator that like
Hmm.
scales up and down based on the square footage of the house. It's not like perfect. It's very like bare bones, but funny enough, it like usually in rehabs is within like 3 or 4 thousand bucks, which
Yeah.
is like of like real numbers, which is to me hilarious because I did it in like 30 minutes. So um I built that so they had like an accurate way to gauge repairs and just a system for like here's what we think repairs are. here's what we think ARV is. And then when I would reply as the manager, I would say, here's what I think repairs are. Here's what I think ARV is. Here's your
Mm,
offer based on this formula, right? So like everything was in one place. And then what we also did is in that email we CC'd. It's funny because like everyone is CC'd on it. So like um, the transaction coordinator slash ops he's one guy. He's CC'd on it
hmm
because he's going to be the one who pulls the actual flip numbers and tells us what this will actually cost us, right? So he's CC'd on it. My dispo guy is CC'd on it because when he goes to dispo it, now he has all those notes in front of his face
mm,
and he can say, yo, I think ARV and repairs with this, and you guys had this. That's where our hiccup is. Essentially, deals were
mm,
getting canceled for a lot of it was just we were locking up stuff for too much. We had inaccurate ARVs, we had inaccurate repairs. And so the system
mm.
kind of made it to where at least now all the writing's on the wall. So if we do have an issue, we can pinpoint it and say, okay,
Yeah.
we keep saying ARV is too high. That's why we're offering this much based on this formula. Repairs were perfect, right? So through that, we were able to figure out what the heck we were doing wrong and have like a
Yeah.
system. So that greatly helped. That was
hmm
that was probably the biggest thing. And then on top of that, to make the rate even better, the success rate even better, it's really hard to dispo deals in like Ocala, like in the woods. It just is. Like it's just hard. Like
Sure.
there's one guy, his name's like Billy Bob Thornton, practically, and he's got like two teeth and like they're psychos. Like there's like one buyer for all these little like each little sketchy little market we were in has like 100 people population and one guy who buys, and they have like they're just psychos. Like we had one guy who was like ready to pay 45K for this house, and it was like 100%. He's ready to go, and then he's like, but before I sign, how much are you making? And we're like, why do you need to know that? He's like, I'm not signing nothing until I know exactly what you're making, because if you're making more than me, I'm not buying it. I'm like, what? So like we just he was our only buyer. So and I'm not gonna lie, I'm like, yeah, we're making I think 18 grand. He's like, yeah, I can't buy it. I'm like, what? I'm like, you're gonna make he's like, yeah, I'm probably gonna make 16, 17. You're making more than me. Nah. And I'm even pissed off you try to make that much off me. I just don't want to buy it at all now.
What?
So yeah, so like people like that, right? So all that to say, we've now focused or we're starting to focus the majority of our marketing into Duval. Previously, we were like not scared, but like my like areas were always like the niche areas, like Palm Coast, Gainesville, like all these like smaller little niche markets. And I was always kind of like, I don't want to go into Gainesville. There's too much competition. But that was like stupid limiting belief because
hmm
there's way more deals, right? So we've now transitioned and backed out of like those sketchy little small markets for the most part. And now we're transitioning most of our marketing into like Duval. And
Mm.
so the dispo side of things, not only now is our like acquisitions process dialed into where we like have everything on paper, we know what we're, repairs, Airbnb and everything, all that's like documented and better with formulas. But now the dispo side is way better because it's in a market like Duval where, as you and I have been talking about it over the last couple of weeks, the the deals are so much easier to sell because instead of there
hmm
being one buyer, there's like a ton of buyers, and there's just way more buyer action. I mean, you saw that deal like you and I were talking about where we actually both got it under contract,
Yeah.
right? But my guys had beat you by a week, so of course I was
Next
so
time.
happy. Yeah,
Next time.
next time. But just so for all, like your viewers, like basically we got this deal under contract with this guy, and a week later he somehow we find out that another company like got it under contract. Oh yeah, we use the same
Same
title company,
title
me and my
company. Yeah.
so our title girl Rebecca's like, hey, another company just sent in a contract for this, and I'm like, oh my gosh, because it was a juicy deal. So I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, like I'm gonna be dealing with some brand new wholesaler who's like 17 years old, and he's gonna be like annoying. And then it's like, she said the name of your company, and I knew it right away. I'm like, oh, that's Mike. I'm like, I was so happy because I'm like, let's go, because he's not like a psycho. And so of course I called him and we talked about it, and he's like, "Man, you beat me, right?" And I'm like, "Yep, we." So Mike's like, "Well, whatever you want us to do, we're obviously going to cancel, but if you want us to tee up to the seller, all that stuff." But anyways, he's of course trying to get a deal, so he's like, "Well, how much would you sell it to me for?" And at that
Yeah.
point, we had had the
'Cause I
deal
would
for
have
a little
flipped.
bit.
I would have flipped it if I could have made a margin on it.
Of
Like I
course,
would have
of
loved to.
course,
Yeah.
of course, and if you would have been even close, I would have done it. And but at that time, we had already sent the deal out, and so I looked and I asked our dispo guy like what we were getting offers at, and it was incredibly high. And I'm like Mike's like, what are you selling this thing for? I'm like, man, it's stupid high. He's like, well, I'll pay. I think you said like 85. I'm
Yeah.
like, bro. At the time, I'm like, bro, we have an offer, and I don't know how someone's paying this. We have an offer for like 130.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh my gosh!" And that's when we got into talk about he needs to get a dispo guy. But anyways, that same deal we actually ended up selling for 150 with like 15K of that going to like a realtor. So really, like we're getting 135, and it's probably not even going to close because it's like a psycho situation. But all that to say, dispo in Jacksonville is way, way, way easier than the small rural markets we were in. Like we basically found out we were playing hardball. Like we were playing everything on like expert level. Whereas like Jacksonville dispo, you're just I would almost not never flip in Jacksonville. Like if you
Mm,
have a good dispo person, I would almost never take on the risk of flipping because I don't know how these people, like that gentleman, I do not know how he's paying 150 for the house. He's doing the work himself and all that stuff. But even then, like I would be at 85 for that deal, like my max, like we're just with you, right?
yeah.
So, so yeah,
Yeah. It's wild. So have like, I know you've been working on building out the team, and obviously after our conversation, I'm specifically interested about building out the dispo side. So do you want to talk about for the listeners kind of how you've gone about building out that dispo process? And I think you mentioned something unique offline that you did to tweak it pretty recently.
you're gonna have to message me and remind me of what I said, but I don't know.
Assistant.
Oh, heard. So, thank you. Um, so yeah, dispo is incredibly important right now because deals aren't like they were in like 2021 or early 2022, where you could just like there was a hedge fund that would buy anything, and if the hedge fund wouldn't buy it, like everyone had just was paying crazy numbers for deals because there was just way more buyers than sellers, and the state of that market was crazy. Now it's not like that. Now it is truly you're looking for the one-off buyers who will pay $20,000 more than everybody else. You're always going to have like when you post on Yellowbird, the majority of the people they're going to be using like the MAO formula, and they're going to be offering like on that house that Mike talked about 85, which is exactly what I'd offer because that's the formula I've used too, right? Um, but there's a whole bunch of newer buyers who oftentimes are doing the work themselves, or still don't know how they're paying as much as they're paying. But point is, there's a lot of buyers in Jacksonville that'll actually pay a lot more. You just have to hunt for them. Oftentimes,
Mm,
it's sometimes you get lucky, right? Sometimes you can make a post and that buyer will comment, and then you boom, you got it. But a lot of times you have to pull the cash buyers list for the county. So like
mm,
if I was to like just work dispo and pretend I didn't have this business and I was just going to be a dispo guy, first thing I would do is pull a cash buyers list for the county you're in. So for Duval, I'd pull, cash buyers of, hey, have you bought in at least 3 properties in the last year, right? And then skip trace all those people. Then I would just call them and just vet them, figure out what they want to buy, what's their buy box is, and just make a note of what everyone wants to buy. And it's simple. When you get something that's similar to what they want, you just call them, right? I will say, um, like to take it even more advanced, that is a good thing to do if it's just you. But like for instance, Ryan Kelly, he has a lot of deals he's already pushing, so he doesn't have time to just like farm like we call them like new untouched buyers. Like he doesn't just like he
this
has
is your guy who works for you, or
yeah, in office. So like
oh, okay,
Ryan,
great.
like my main dispo guy, he doesn't have time with the deals he's trying to sell to like just vet out new buyers all the time because it's two separate
Mm,
things. You're either calling them with a deal to sell or you're calling them to get them added to your buyers list, right?
mhm.
If you try to do both, it's a little hard unless of course they comment directly on your post. Here, call me. Here's my email. Then you can of course call them and pitch them the deal and do it all in one.
Oh,
The
you're
thing is,
never. You never reach out just to sell someone something right away. You always build a relationship with them first. Is that the
No, we do, but I'm saying it normally doesn't work out like that because you wanna always be building your buyers list,
okay?
right?
Gotcha.
So it's hard for one person to be trying to always build a buyers list and sell deals at the same time. So what we recently did is we hired a dispo assistant who's in Mexico. Her name is Sadie, and she's an absolute beast. And all she does now is add buyers. We have her on a dialer, and she's calling cash buyers in prospective counties that we're in. And her KPI is to add 5 buyers a day. And what she does is she
Mm,
adds those 5 buyers to Ryan's. Ryan basically has his own like app in our CRM called the Cash Buyers app, and they're
hmm
just when she adds them in, they show up for him as new untouched buyers, and then so she like does the initial contact, kind of vets them a little bit. But then Ryan's job is instead of him having a cold call a giant list, he already
mm,
has like these already vetted cash buyers and that new untouched. So Ryan will call them directly, vet them further, and then really the end goal for any of our end buyers is to get them added to what's called community app, which is basically a fully opt-in text messaging platform. So
hmm
when we have a deal, we can just text it to you with 100% deliverability. So that's what we're trying to move a
mm,
lot of our VIP buyers first onto that because one, it's way like most people prefer to get a text than an email. And two, for our sake, they're like 4 or 5 times more likely to open it. Because like oftentimes we're sending out like actual deals, but most investors' inboxes are filled up with junk deals. So ours is just blended in with all the other crap. Whereas if we can, appear a little different via text, then that's what we do. And then
yeah.
yeah, so that's what a dispo person really does. They find you in buyers and keep building that cash buyers list. Because dude, there's buyers that only buy 2 deals a year, but they'll pay 30K above what any other buyer will pay.
Mm. So is it pretty much you're pretty much always finding them from the data, like the skit, like the looking at the data of cash buyers and then just calling them.
So there's multiple sources. So you can find them there. You can also find them through Facebook groups like Yellowbird, where
Mm,
they comment their email and all that, and then you vet them from there. You can also find them. I know I was hating on it, but Investor Lift.
hmm
When you post a deal on there, anyone who clicks your deal, you can like pay a certain amount to like actually contact them directly. So
mm,
that is also kind of where you can source buyers as well. Um, but I would say the probably best way is just between Facebook posts and then
mm,
like you should always be doing that for like your dispo person should always be posting, hey, looking to add some more cash buyers. We have fresh deals in 3200 whatever 32208 or whatever. So that and then the having a cold call person like have a full list. Like those two things, you'll get a ton of buyers and it's just way better.
yeah. And then your cold caller, the dispo assistant, she said her goal, her KPI is to add 5 buyers a day. Like how much information is she supposed to add with that buyer? Because I know like Ryan's supposed to dive in further.
So honestly, I'm not sure exactly because Ryan's like fully like in charge of her. Like he does
Great
one-on-ones
answer.
with her. He does all that. So I don't really know, but I know it's like baseline. I want to say it's probably 3 or 4 questions, something
hmm
like that, where Ryan's gonna dive deeper of like how often the guy wants to buy, like exactly what he's using for financing, like kind of just more specific stuff. And yeah.
And then like, are you like, is there fields in your CRM or something where you're tracking like the areas they want to buy? Like, I guess like, what's the information that your dispo guy is keeping that so he can easily be like, oh, can you like run a filter in your CRM and say, I've got this property and here's like the possible best, I don't know, 10, 20 people?
Yes, for sure. So basically, we have it's one by county because we're in all these different markets. So we'll
hmm
have like each like kind of like major market there. And so they're tagged into, they can be in multiple. And then
hmm
he has a filter set up to where he can filter by, how much they want to pay, the size of the house, and then which county it's in to see which
mm
buyers. And then there's a couple more filters. So basically, like every fillable that he fills in there can be filtered into a view and saved for him. So,
mm.
yeah,
So he can then, yeah, get a property and he knows who to call. Gotcha.
exactly, exactly. And then too, like a lot of it, you just start to like what I've noticed with them is like you just start to know like who's the best buyer on a certain type of house. Like
Mm.
especially the really consistent like flippers who really want stuff. They'll be like I tell anyone too when we go to meetups and they're like, man, I want to buy a deal. I'm like, dude, set up. I just told a lady yesterday at our meetup. I'm like, set up an auto text each week to text Ryan Kelly. Say, hey Rye, got any fresh deals? Because the people that do that, they're at the top of mind for him. But even
Sure.
beside that, he knows like when we have deals where we sell them, we'll have an offer come in a couple days later for like more money, right? And so he'll know, oh my gosh, this buyer will pay a lot for a house like that, right? So
Mm.
he already knows, okay, the second we get a house, he's like, dude, I got a guy who's like paying stupid numbers for a house like that. So when they get good, they'll start to kind of already like pre-know who is solid.
Yeah. We were talking a little bit offline about how you've been trying out some Facebook ads. You want to share that experience with people?
Yeah, it's freaking hard. I've lost like 15 grand trying to figure them out. But I'm not giving up. Okay, I'm gonna figure it out because other people are doing it. You can search the Facebook ad library and see tons of
Yeah.
people spending tons of money doing ads. So, um, yeah, I basically had two different mentors now that both were awesome. I fired them both. I learned a lot from both of them, but I fired them both, and now I'm trying my third attempt at this. And so I'm filming all my videos this week. I got all my scripts and everything written out, ready to go. I've changed my approach in a lot of ways too. I used to I was like in all these little markets and Jacksonville and Georgia. I'm just gonna be in Jacksonville. So my call out or like my hook will be specifically like Jacksonville targeted.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it'll be me instead of like an actor. I was using an actor before. So this time it'll be me, and I'll actually be in front of a house. So there's just like so many little things you learn about like advertising, because really like our business is like a sales business first, and then it's a marketing business. And
Mm-hmm.
like I think you have to learn sales in it to like just start and to be able to get even one thing closed. But
Mm-hmm.
I think to really become like, to start reaching profits of over like $1 million a year, I think you really need to get good at marketing and like build that skill. And so that's kind of my big focus is get good at marketing. It's a skill. And like to be fair, you can like it is completely universal. It's not just for this business. The principles of it apply to any other industry. So even in like 5 years, if I don't do this anymore or whatever, like those marketing skills will be with me forever and I could take them wherever I want to go. So
Yeah.
I've already kind of learned like a ton of sales and like not mastered it, but I'll say like I'm pretty freaking good at it. And now it's
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, marketing, it would be highest and best use to spend that my free business like maker time doing
Mm.
marketing. So hopefully I figure it out.
So are those guys who were your mentors, were you having them do the ads for you at first, or you were just kind of like leaning on their expertise for them?
Correct. The second option, yeah. I always knew I didn't want them to manage my ads because there's tons of companies that'll do that. Like I need to learn the skill. I need to learn
Mm.
how to operate like Facebook Ads Manager, how to run campaigns, some of the best standard practices, how to film the videos, how to edit the videos, how to.
Mm.
So I did everything, just with them holding my hand with all their tips. Like, yo, use CapCut. Like, who would have known? CapCut. It's free and it's absolutely gangster at editing and stuff like that. So there's all these little like
Mm.
tips and tricks. So the first guy, he really taught me like the technical skill. He didn't really teach me how to market, but he taught me like
Mm.
how to use Facebook ads. Here's how to edit. Here's what this means. Here's what this means. Here's how to look at all the different KPIs. Then my
Mm.
second person, she was a girl. She was more like real estate focused, right?
Mm.
But her approach just didn't like get us motivated leads. It just didn't really work that well. So I was just kind of like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
And then now I'm gonna combine everything I learned from both of them, and then I actually have a buddy who's doing successful Facebook ads over in Texas, and he's just started, so it could, who knows if it'll continue to work, but he's at least like has proof of concept. So now I'm leaning on his wisdom.
Mm.
Um, and I went to acquisitions.com. I went to like a workshop they had in Vegas a couple
Mm-hmm.
weeks ago, and I was able to talk to their like marketing person, and he gave me a ton of tips that were like incredibly helpful. That I was like, he was pretty much right away. I told him I was doing. He's like, oh well, you obviously. I mean, it wasn't working because of this. Like, no one does this, and I'm like, oh, her. Well, I will not do that. Thank you for telling me.
Gotcha. Um, I know another thing we were talking about a little bit offline is you were thinking about having someone on your team transition into the sales manager role as you grow your team. You want to
Mhm.
talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm operating as a sales manager now. I'm doing the best I can, but I'll be honest, I'm trying to do so many different things at once that like I'm really not the most effective sales manager. Like we're
Mm.
doing sales training every single day, so I'm leading that. So we're doing that for an hour every day. I'm doing one-on-ones; those are an hour. So we're doing those every single week with everyone on the team. And then I'm there. I review every single call, like every single process and offer call they do. I review that every single week.
Every
So I'm
single call you do?
every single full process and full offer.
Full. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Still,
not
that's
just
a lot
like
though.
a
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's sometimes freaking 15 to 20 calls a week or something like that, right? So
Hmm.
I use AI to help me too. I can show you what I use too if you ever want to see. But um, that's a way. I
Talk
guess
about that.
you do it in person, but we can talk
Talk
about that later.
talk
Huh?
about the AI thing. I'm actually curious, just to the audience, what's the AI thing you're using with the calls?
Yeah, so it's called SalesLens.io.
Mm.
I do not use it for what it's could be used for, okay? It has the potential to be like a Ferrari and do this like beautiful high level stuff. And I more treat it like it's like I'm driving the Ferrari, but I'm using it to like move like boxes, right? So like I'm not really using it for what it could do. It's very underutilized to say.
Okay.
So, but essentially what it could potentially do is that's our first one. Let's go. We just started a new direct mail like campaign style this month where we change the phone numbers every month so we can better track like the data.
Hmm.
Every month we have brand new phone numbers. So now the data is tied to a new phone number. Whereas before we were just kind of guessing. We're like,
Hmm.
because the same numbers we used in December were the same ones we used in November. So we're like, okay, all these drops happened on these dates, and this should be roughly when the calls came in. And like we're just kind
Hmm.
of based on time frame, if you know what I'm saying. But now
Yep.
this new month we specifically like do it using new phone numbers, at least for 3 months in a row. And we just
Hmm.
got a call for a new batch because I've been wondering like when's we getting our call. So, anyways, tangent. Sales lens. Okay, and I mentioned this to you probably like 6 months ago.
Hmm.
Uh, when 6 months ago, the AI was not good enough. It was inconsistent.
Mm.
Now it seems like it's better. It's still not like perfect. So essentially, here's what Sales Lens could do. So automatically, you can make your sales calls automatically feed into Sales Lens. You can set it up so that the AI in Sales Lens automatically will tag the call for what it is. For instance, we have three types of calls. We have the process,
Hmm.
the offer, and the DocuSign. So you can set AI question-based criteria that's called a smart tag in your sales lens so that when a call automatically feeds in from when your team
Hmm.
makes a call, it'll tag it, right? It'll say, okay, this is a process call. um, Now then, based on what it tags it as, you
Hmm.
then can have a grading system set up where what always happens is that the whole call gets transcribed right away. So
Hmm.
it'll be like agent, person one, if there's another seller, person two, whatever. And it'll transcribe the whole call. And what you can do is you can basically have it grade the call based on questions you ask the AI. And you can pick the weight of each question. Um, so
Mm.
for instance, in ours, like motivation is its own section. It's a
Mm.
35% weight. So effectively, if they do everything else perfectly, but I get a zero on motivation, they get a 65. Right? Does that make
Mm.
sense?
Uh-huh.
So you pick certain like subjects. So mine's like motivation. Before when money section was a big deal, money section was like its own thing. It was like
Yeah.
25% money section. But you kind of pick these subjects and give them a weight. And then inside each subject, you have questions, right? And they have to be
Mm.
questions that can be answered via yes or no. So it would be something along the
Okay.
lines of, here, I'll pull up just a couple that I have. This is the part that I have that's completely underutilized, meaning I have
Mm.
not made the questions perfect. I would get a little frustrated because I would rerun the same call twice and the answers would be different. So the
Mm.
AI wasn't grading it perfectly. Does that make sense? So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um, So I was getting a little like, what are we doing this for? I'll tell you what it can do, then I'll tell you what I use it for. But essentially, um, part of our script, as we went over earlier, is like, are you ready to make a confident yes or no decision? So in our offer call, one of my offer call questions, so the offer call comes in, the system will automatically, based on the criteria I give it, tag it as an offer call, and then it'll grade it based on the offer call questions. One of those is, did the customer seem like they were confident in making a yes or no decision, right?
Mm. Yep.
And you give it a value. A yes is 2, a no is 0, and a neutral or not available is a 1. You can give a
Mm.
weight to the answer of the question. And then you have like multiple, right? You can this is the part where you really can, like, if you are gonna go all in, you could spend like a week or two just making it perfect, right? Another one is
Mm.
like, please analyze the conversation for any non-committal or passive language from the seller prior to the offer being presented. Non-committal language can include vague responses, uncertainty, or hedging phrases such as "I'm not sure" or "I'll need to think about it." If such language was displayed, did the salesman address it during the call? Addressing non-committal language could include follow-up questions, and then I was like more. But like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so that's where you can get kind of crazy with it. So
Mm.
from there, it'll spit a grade out. Now, if you have a really good question set up that are consistent, and you can rerun the same call 5 times to get a similar grade, then this can actually be used to, without you really having to look at the calls, to just look at the dashboard and say, okay, well, this and it's your sales team. It knows which salesperson it is too. So it'll know,
Ah.
okay, these
Okay.
are Chris's
Yeah.
calls, these are Garrett's calls, these are Ryan's calls, and then it'll give each person a grade. Like you can, like, look at the results of, like, you can see a chart of like, okay, well, Garrett was getting 70%, so that's last month, and he's gotten better, and his score has climbed. Now his average call is a 92%, right?
Mm.
That's what it can do. I will say it's very dependent on the AI being accurate, and it's very dependent on you asking very clear, concise questions to the AI. AI
Mm.
is a tool, as you know, so it's only as good as you are good at using it. I haven't like found, I haven't like gone deep enough to like make it perfect, to be honest. And I would get
Mm.
frustrated because I would run a call with the questions I gave it, and it would give a good assessment, and I'd be like, "This is perfect." Like okay, and what it'll do is it'll explain it too, which is really cool. It'll tell you why it graded it.
Ah.
It'll give the salesman smart notes. So it'll say, "Here's kind of what everyone talked about. Here's some action items. Here's like it'll like, dude, it's really cool in that regard." But as far as the grading, I would rerun a call twice, and it would be like, "Oh, a 90%." The next time, like the same question it said that it got perfect, it would be like, "No, it didn't get it right because of this, this, this." And it's like inaccurate.
Ah.
I hated that. So now all I use it for, I used to have it auto feed all my calls in and then auto tag them. Okay. There was issues with the tagging, so sometimes it would tag them wrong, right? And then the grading kind
Mm.
of sucked because I wasn't good. I didn't do good at that, so it was kind of like pointless. So now all calls are uploaded manually by my assistant Pam. So at the beginning of each week on Monday, she goes and looks at the full last week of process and offer calls. She
Mhm.
uploads every single one in order by closer. So all of Chris's, all of Garrett's,
Mhm.
and tags them automatically. She tags them. She doesn't let the system do it because sometimes the system's inaccurate. So tags it as a process call or an offer call, and then that's what she does. There's still questions that'll feed it through, but I ignore them because they're inaccurate anyway. And all
Mm.
I use it for is the transcription and the play button because the audio is right there too. So
Okay.
so what I'll do is I'll listen to all the calls and I'll pull up a spreadsheet, and I will basically have a checklist of like our process of like, does the salesperson ask motivation? Do they
Mhm.
ask? Do they do they ask urgency? Is the seller urgent? Right. So like, and that's like
Mm.
green and red on an Excel kind of chart. So I kind of do that, and then after each call, I will put all my notes that I write on their call in the comment section in Sales Lens.
Yeah.
Right. And then in my chart on Excel, I have the Sales Lens link. I have all that stuff. So that when we do our one-on-one, I've already listened to every single call. I've already been able to, and I have an area for patterns too. So I've been able to point out, 2 to 3 patterns I'm noticing them doing. So in our one-on-one, I'll have every call in order, and we'll be
Yeah.
able to go. And it's really cool because it makes it so much quicker to listen to calls because I'm not just guessing. I can scroll through the whole transcription, get to the part that I know I need to coach on, and just
Ah.
click the words. And when I click the words, it starts talking of right where I'm clicking instead of just like, as you know, if you're just listening to an audio clip, You're just
Oh,
dragging the time thing at the bottom and just like guessing. So, dude,
yep.
it made it so that one, I can listen to every call pretty efficiently because there's a lot of stuff I don't need to hear. That's just kind of
Yeah.
like waste of time. But there's really important parts like that urgency piece. I know Chris struggles with urgency, so I'm gonna go to all his calls. I'm gonna make sure I get that, get plan, all
Mm,
this stuff. And then so when we do our one-on-ones, it makes it so much quicker, so we can actually listen to way more calls, go over all my notes that I've already hit, and they have access to this as well. So they
mm.
actually um, can log into the system and see all their calls and all my comments in there too. So that's what I use it for. But like I said, I'm like using it for a moving truck and it's a Ferrari. If you know what I mean?
Yeah. I gotcha. Luis asked, outside of those different phone numbers, what are you doing for direct mail?
So I'm trying different stuff. I was using check mailers before. They were like
Hmm.
crushing for like 2 months, and then like last month they absolutely sucked, like really
Mm,
bad, like 0.03% or whatever, 0.3%. Like under industry, I think industry is 0.05 is industry standard, and we were like
mm,
almost half that. So this month, trying postcards to see. We
mm,
did good like 3 or 4 months ago with those. So that's what we're doing with that. Now we're actually tracking the data very well, and now we're
mm,
going to be using like data management stuff. I wasn't really using that for my direct mail.
mhm.
Um, So we'll see, but we just got our first phone call, which is fire because the mail dropped on the 7th and it only mailed during business day or something like that.
Mm.
So that's fire. We're getting calls. So yeah, direct mail. It is expensive and it is, at least right now, it's the hot commodity. It's what everyone's getting into because
Mm.
um, SMS is getting crushed and cold calling is going to be crushed eventually. And so a lot of people are reading the writing on the wall there. And direct mail is just, it's easy. You just literally like pay a lot of money. I mean, it seems easy. Okay, I'll say it seems easy. Whereas Facebook ads and like that type of stuff, it's like really difficult. There's like so many variables. Whereas direct mail, it's like you can message the mail house. You can say, hey, what's the best performing mail piece that you're seeing your clients buy? And they'll say
Mhm.
this one, right? And then it's like, where should I get my data? And they'll say, well, a lot of people go here. And then it's like, great, like you have your two things, and now just spend money.
Yeah.
So I think that's
Are
why
you
it's
do
so attractive.
you doing anything else unique for marketing?
No, I do TV ads still. I'm about to refill my TV ad because it's not really performing very well. We do SEO.
Mm,
Um, my big focus now is like dial in my Facebook ads. Like I want those like
mm.
I want to get my cost per contract right now is probably like 3-4 thousand bucks, and I want to get that down to like under 1,000, and
Dude, that's
really
pretty
do.
good. I mean, that's Duval County. That's good, man. 3 to 4 thousand Duval County is solid.
Yeah, yeah. It just sucks. I'm used to the SMS days where the cost per contract was like a couple $100 or whatever. I think I can get cost per contract well below 1,000 bucks if I can do a really good job with my Facebook ads
Mm,
in Duval. So
sure.
that's really that's where I'm gonna be just like obsessing over, and I've been obsessing over it all day. That's why I've been talking about it. Like that's what I've been at a coffee shop for like most of the day today, just like trying to get everything dialed in.
Mm,
So that's gonna be, and then too, the cool thing about social media, like ads, is it's so scalable. You can just feed more money to the beast and get better and stuff like
mhm.
that. So it just feels better than direct mail. I think direct mail is the hot commodity. I think everyone's doing it, and I think it's just gonna be less good as these old people die off.
Fair enough.
You know what I mean? Like I
Well,
don't check like I check my mail, but I give it to Ian, and Ian just throws out all the stuff that's not good, and then the
yeah,
stuff that's like an insurance refund we cash, and everything else
right.
goes lit on
Yeah,
fire. You know what I mean?
yeah. We're getting close to the end here, man. There's always two questions I like to ask at the end of the show. First being, what is the craziest or most uncomfortable situation that you have ever experienced in a real estate deal?
Craziest or most uncomfortable? There was a deal in my neighborhood. I live in St. Augustine, born and raised there. And this deal was actually in the same neighborhood that I owned my personal house in that I bought a couple years ago. was like probably a 2-minute walk from my house, which excites me because it's in my neighborhood. So if it's in my neighborhood, for some reason, it feels more appealing to do like an Airbnb and like. And I'm not just looking at like a wholesale. It's like for me, oh, this could be more. Like it's just exciting. I don't know. I don't know if it's like that for you. If a house is like right next to where you live, it's kind of like just more exciting. I don't know. So, anyways, I go and meet this guy. He's like 90 years old, and I go and meet him. And the second he opens the door, I'm hit with like cigarette smoke and like it smells like cockroach, like dead cockroach. Like it smells gross.
Hmm.
And we walk in, and bro, we sit at this disgusting table. There's cockroaches crawling over the table on stuff.
Oh,
And we start talking, and bro, I look down, and between like he's sitting next to me, his whole entire nutsack out, bro. Whole thing, dude. And he's like 90, so it's practically like a giant rubber band. And I'm like, it was just horrible. And like it was so cockroaches are crawling all over my legs. I'm trying to talk to this guy. We eventually talked money, and he was like delusional. He was literally like the most we could pay for that house was like 150. He's like, I want 350. I'm like what? Like no one's gonna like this place is in shambles. So, I didn't really say that, but essentially like, the numbers didn't work. He ended up selling it like actually a couple of years later, so it was probably 4 or 5 months ago now, to a
huh.
random wholesaler for like 200K. So someone was able to rizz him up and get it done. But yeah, that
Yeah.
was like the craziest, like just crazy.
Jeez. Well, the last question I always like to ask men is, if you could go back in time, give yourself one piece of advice when you were looking for your first deal, knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself?
I would say um, go all in on SMS and hire people quickly.
Hmm.
If I could go back, I would have. I think my first year, I made like 5 or 600K, and that was with JVing every single deal with Kyle, and I only got
Hmm.
33%. Um, if I could have gone back and like who I am now, bro, I have the skill talent. I have the talent of being able to hire and like
Hmm.
build systems and teams. Oh my gosh, I would be the SMS king. I would do SMS in every market. I would have like 7 dispo guys just for all the different markets I was in. Like, bro,
Hmm.
it would be because the leads were so cheap. I didn't realize how spoiled I was at the time. Like, I guarantee you, I could have probably done like 8 to 10 million in revenue in that one
Yep.
year if I would have just like someone just tapped me and said, "Go all in on SMS, trust me."
Trust me.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being on the show, man. If people want to reach out to you after, if they have questions or they just want to get in touch with you, how can they go about doing that?
You guys can DM me on Instagram. It's Ryan Rice with 3 E's at the end.
Cool. Awesome, man. Thanks for being on.
Peace. Always good seeing you.